still here tonight. The Queen signed a new law passed by MPs last week designed to prevent a no-deal Brexit, and later tonight MPs will be asked to vote for a second time on Boris Johnson's call for a general election. Well, the Prime Minister spent this morning in Dublin, where he said that leaving the EU without a deal would be a failure of statecraft. The Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, countered that the UK had yet to offer practical solutions to the Irish backstop. That's the mechanism to avoid a hard border in Ireland. And in a further twist this afternoon, the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, a key figure in the parliamentary Brexit process, announced that he'd be standing down at the end of next month. So let's join our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg, who's in the Houses of Parliament tonight.
Hugh, it's less than a week since MPs came back to Parliament after the summer break. And in that time, we've seen a whole Brexit box set with a very improbable plot. There have been defeats for the new Prime Minister, possibly another one tonight, resignations from the government, and some Tory MPs even being kicked out from their party. An extraordinary period where everything's almost been running like a helter-skelter, going at 1,000 miles an hour. But this morning, the Prime Minister started with a more traditional appearance with the Irish leader. My report, beginning there, does have some flash photography.
That's some guest book.
Michel Barnier has been here recently.
Boris Johnson's turn to put his name on the Irish Taoiseach's visitor list.
Donald Trump. Goodness.
He might be more at ease with the small talk than his predecessor, but the problem is much the same. What to do about the Irish border if there's no Brexit deal? Although this week, the Prime Minister sounded a lot more committed to trying than in recent days.
I want to get a deal. Like you, I've looked carefully at no deal. I've assessed its consequences, both for our country and yours. And yes, of course, we could do it. The UK could certainly get through it. But be in no doubt, that outcome would be a failure of statecraft for which we would all be responsible.
Awkwardly, the Irish leader made it plain he's seen no new solution from the UK yet to the backstop, the controversial insurance guarantee against bringing back a hard border that Theresa May agreed, but Parliament hated.
What we cannot do and will not do, and I know you understand this, is agree to the replacement of a legal guarantee with a promise. We are open to alternatives, but they must be realistic ones, legally binding and workable, and we haven't received such proposals to date.
No sudden breakthrough in Dublin today, or at home, where Parliament's passed a law to try to make it impossible for the Prime Minister to take us out of the EU without a deal, which Boris Johnson wants as an option.
Order.
There's no more of a symbol of Parliament's right to resist Downing Street than the Speaker, John Bercow.
I would like to make a personal statement.
Who in this long-running drama had a scene of his own.
My tenure as Speaker and MP will end when this Parliament ends.
In classic fashion, Mr Bercow, who's infuriated the government and was at the centre of serious bullying allegations which he denies, will go, but only after this latest round of Brexit controversy is done.
We degrade this Parliament at our peril.
That blast aimed at Boris Johnson, and he was applauded, but look where the clapping comes from. All too obvious, this is a House profoundly divided. And later tonight, the Commons will pack up for a few weeks, the government calling an early halt.
We will do everything we can to prevent the crashing out on the 31st of October, and will support an election when that is clear that we're not doing that crashing out.
Still time, though, for the forces ranged against the Prime Minister to defeat him.
The ayes to the right, 311. The noes to the left, 302.
Narrowly, MPs voted to force Number 10 to publish documents about no deal and the private messages of Downing Street staff.
So the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
The opposition might block them, but right now it's the Tories who are in a hurry to get to the ballot box. And for a government with no majority, a parliament where there's no agreement, sooner or later, we're all heading there. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's talk about the events in Dublin, because at the centre of those talks in Dublin today was the so-called Irish backstop. Once again, that's the mechanism to avoid a hard border in Ireland. As things stand, the UK and Ireland are both EU member states, so goods can cross the border without the need for checks. Well, after Brexit, the 310-mile border between Northern Ireland and the Republic would be the only land border between the UK and the EU. A failure to reach a trade agreement would mean that Northern Ireland would end up with different rules and standards to the Republic of Ireland. And to avoid any checks, an insurance plan, a backstop agreed between Theresa May and EU leaders, would keep the UK in a close relationship with the EU until a trade deal was agreed. Now, some Conservative MPs fear that the UK would be trapped indefinitely by such an arrangement. And some have suggested recently that the deal could be amended so that the backstop only applies to Northern Ireland. And that could prove controversial as well, because that would be a new border in effect being created in the Irish Sea. So that's the context, and it's been a persistent obstacle in these talks. Now, Europe editor Katja Adler is in Brussels tonight. And Katja, is there a chance, do you think, that this suggestion of a Northern Ireland-only backstop could, in a way, unlock maybe these Brexit talks?
Well, look, Hugh, if the Prime Minister insists that the backstop doesn't need just to be tweaked but to be replaced altogether, then the EU thinks the Northern Ireland-only backstop could be the way forward because it ticks boxes for both sides. For the EU, it protects the single market and Member State Ireland and the Northern Ireland peace process. It allows Great Britain to make whatever trade deals it wants after Brexit. It allows Northern Ireland to benefit economically from the EU and the UK while maintaining the same political relations with the rest of the UK. This Northern Ireland-only backstop was the EU's first backstop proposal. So, Hugh, if the Prime Minister were to go for it, the EU could get it ready in plenty of time for that crucial EU leaders summit in mid-October, allowing Boris Johnson to say, job done, renegotiated, I told you so. But it is not all sunshine and light. The Northern Ireland-only backstop could potentially open up a whole can of worms. It does separate Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK in regulatory terms. Theresa May said no Prime Minister could sign up to it, so could Boris Johnson. And even if he can, what about the rest of MPs? There will definitely be at least some unionist opposition. And what about Scotland if Northern Ireland gets a special deal with the EU after Brexit? Won't Scotland push for that as well? It is far from straightforward, and EU leaders can see that. And that's why behind the scenes they say they are open to another Brexit extension if they're asked for one, whatever France said this weekend.
Katja, once again, many thanks. Katja Adler, our Europe editor, with the latest there in Brussels. Well, as Laura was telling us earlier, the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, the person who manages debates and discipline in the chamber, has confirmed that he will stand down by the end of October and won't stand as an MP at the next election. In an emotional speech, he warned against undermining Parliament, and he reminded MPs that they were representatives and not delegates. His time in the chair has at times been highly controversial, as our deputy political editor John Pienaar now tells us.
The referee who became a player, loving every minute, as much as many Conservatives hated him for siding with the Commons against a no-deal Brexit.
March on our way.
Today he told them he'd planned his own exit in his own time, on Brexit Day. Not much warmth on the Tory side, but it was his moment, as he thanked colleagues, friends.
And above all, my wife Sally and our 3 children, Oliver, Freddie and Jemima.
John Bercow's supporters saw him as defender of the Commons, champion of MPs, though he sometimes put them in their place.
I don't require any comment or signalling from the Honourable Gentleman. I'm giving a ruling. The Honourable Gentleman will listen to it, and he can like it or lump it. Be quiet. If you can't be quiet, get out. You're adding nothing, you're subtracting a lot. It's rude, it's stupid, it's pompous, and it needs to stop.
Hosting world leaders goes with the job. The Chinese leader was welcome, but not Donald Trump.
I would not wish to issue an invitation to President Trump.
Controversy dogged his footsteps. A report suggested he'd failed to tackle bullying of staff at Westminster. He had to deny bullying his own staff, and one minister claimed he'd called her stupid and challenged him.
When an opposition member found that you had called me a stupid woman, you did not apologise in this chamber.
Once he was a devout Tory.
We are in so many ways.
But in high office as Speaker, falling out with Tory Prime Ministers became a habit. Quite a career from fiery young Conservative.
If that means shifting many state services and industries to the private sector, so be it.
Lots of people are annoyed at this decision. What would you reply to that?
To man in the news for defying a Tory government.
And I wish you a good day.
And he'll likely make another headline or two before he's done. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, we'll be talking to our political editor Laura Koonsberg in just a moment, but let's have a quick look at some of the key dates ahead over the coming months. Parliament will be suspended or prorogued formally for 5 weeks at the end of business in Westminster tonight. MPs will return for the Queen's speech, in which the government lays out its key plans on Monday the 14th of October, and an EU summit will be held on Thursday the 17th of October, during which the Prime Minister hopes to be able, he says, to agree a new Brexit deal with European leaders. And if they reach an agreement that's then passed here by the UK Parliament, then the UK will leave the EU on the 31st of October. If not, well, the law now states that the Prime Minister will need to go to the EU and request another extension. And that is something that Boris Johnson has said he will not do. So with that in mind, let's join Laura again inside the Houses of Parliament. Laura, what is your view on whether the Prime Minister can deliver Brexit on the 31st of October?
Well, Hugh, has Boris Johnson had a rude awakening in the week or so since MPs have been back? Absolutely. Has he been defeated and, frankly, had a bit of a shocker when you look at how people who were in his party and the opposition parties have been working together to line up against him? And certainly this place has made it harder for him to stick to that goal of Brexit or bust, do or die by Halloween. But is it, as things stand, absolutely 100% impossible that he would be able to achieve that? Well, absolutely not. It's still possible, if though extremely tricky, that he might be able to get a deal with the EU in time. It's also still possible that Number 10 might find some kind of way, however controversial, of being able to get round the kind of delay that Parliament wants to force upon him. And more broadly, I just think that we've still got weeks and weeks here to go. 5 weeks before MPs are back here, and then another few weeks after that before that Halloween deadline actually hoves into sight. And there could be all sorts of things that no one in this place, even in the wilder moments in the last 7 days, have even contemplated that could unfold. Politics has changed a lot in the last few years since the referendum, but it's still true that a week is still a long time in this trade, let alone a month and a half, and nothing is truly off the table.
Laura, once again, thanks very much. Laura Koonsberg there with the latest inside the Houses of Parliament. Well, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, is expected to reject calls from senior party colleagues to campaign unequivocally to remain in the EU in the event of a general election. Mr Corbyn has been resisting pressure to back Remain under all circumstances, and in what's being seen as a significant move, is expected to say that the public should be given a choice of leaving with a deal.